Sharing. So I will get started because, as I said, I have a lot to cover and I want to make sure I get to as much of it as I can. So again, today we're going to be talking about a variety of different topics, but they're all related. I'm going to have us step back a little bit. Buyer motivations, business models, and pricing, or more importantly, prices. How do we present prices and what are some pricing tips? So the first thing I always want to do is I want to acknowledge that I am on the unceded, ancestral, and traditional territories of the Musqueam peoples. And I only say that because I'm a guest, I'm a settler on this land, and I really want to acknowledge the gift that I have to do the work that I do on this land. And so tonight, I hope that I will make those ancestors proud, as well as my ancestors, which come from Africa and Latin America, proud as we sort of move forward. And I think it's just important to acknowledge that we stand on the shoulders of so many other people and we have this wonderful opportunity. So I just want to acknowledge that. And please, if you are on your ancestral territories, also maybe just a quick moment to just thank the opportunities that you guys, we all have, because we all come from indigenous peoples around the world, not just Canada, but around the world. And I like to acknowledge that. And I think it's really important that we do. Here we go. Where we're going to start. What are we going to talk about today? And we're going to talk about today is sort of three basic things. I want to start with why people or customers buy. So let's step back and talk about sort of motivations, what really motivates people to buy. So I'm going to go through that first. Then the next thing I want to talk about are the fundamentals of primary, secondary, and tertiary markets. So different business models and how they fit into markets, and a little bit of just a sort of some basics in that space. And then what I'm going to talk about here is finally specific business models, a couple of ideas, not exhaustive, but I'm going to hopefully plant some that may get you thinking, as well as some pricing tips and best practices around pricing. More importantly, how do you present prices? How do we talk about prices as we go forward? So that's what we're going to hit today. In terms of the agenda, first thing off the bat are buyer motivations, market fundamentals, business models, pricing tips, and then action items and next steps. One thing you will find at the end of my presentation, I have a whole bunch of additional links and resources and articles that are going to build on what I talk about tonight. So I'm going to scratch the surface, but I've actually curated a couple of really good articles that I would recommend you want to use that might help you get more details around what I talk about tonight. So to get started, buyer motivation. So I'm going to talk about in the next few slides why people buy. And as I go through this, I want you to think about your customers and what are some of the benefits that really is important, like which one of these apply to your customers, which ones apply to potential products that you have. So really think about, are these things that we are seeing in what we're offering, and are we actually communicating these benefits and these motivations? Okay, because sometimes you have them, but you're not actually communicating them. So really, what I'm going to do is I'm not going to talk about what people pay for. I'm going to talk about why. And so it's really about the sort of the psychology of why people pay for things. And I want you to also think about yourself. What do you pay for and why do you pay for things? So the first thing we're going to talk about is time. And many of you know this, but most customers will pay to save time. So if you can save them time, or if you can allow them to do something faster, they will pay for that. So are there things that you are doing that are actually saving your customers time, saving your target audience time, or that allows them to do that faster? Are you providing a way for them to do things more conveniently? If it is more about convenience, that is something that you should be highlighting. Or is it something that they can get quicker or get it now, faster, right? So again, if I don't have to go to the store, but I can download something immediately, that is the reason sometimes I'll pay a premium in my pricing. And generally speaking, when it comes to time, if somebody can do something twice as fast, you can charge twice as much. Or if you're saving them half the time, using a multiple, you can actually charge them twice as much, because in essence, that savings is a multiple of what they're doing. If they can do something 3 times faster, I'm going to generally pay 3 times more to do it 3 times faster. We also pay for comfort. And so when I talk about comfort, people go, oh, okay, well, I get this in the luxury industry. What does this mean in a SaaS model? What does this mean online? So I would say advertising and putting in ads in an ad model would be discomfort in an app, for example. But comfort often is around the customer experience, the user experience. Is your user experience better? Are you onboarding them faster? Do they have the tools better? What is it about that whole sort of onboarding process, customer experience, user experience that is better, that is superior to others in your market and in your industry? That's comfort, right? So are you offering that to your thing? Self-esteem. We also pay to basically make our customers look better. Are you doing things so that they look better, so that in their own eyes, they're a lion? They are really doing what they do really well. Are you providing the tools for them to do that well? Are you providing a way for them to really feel like, hey, I got this, I'm really good, and give them some self-confidence? If you are, people will pay for that. Relationships. A lot of businesses are sort of marketplaces where you're brokering deals, but think about also what relationships are you opening up for your customers? Are you connecting them with other people? Who are you connecting them with? Who are and it might not be the core of your business. It actually could be something else that you've never even thought about, but are you offering relationships and are you communicating that by using your tools, they're part of a community. They now have access to things. That's really important to understand. So what are the relationships and are you offering that? A sense of belonging. So in this case, really the question is, have you created, let's say, a VIP group or an exclusivity group, and they are part of it? They might get something sooner, or they have access. They're part of a community as a whole. Customers like to be part of a community. And so does that make sense for the customers you sell to, that they're belonging? And are you tapping into our need? Really, we long to belong, right? So are you also giving them access? So sometimes we were working with one company that was doing market research reports. They actually had sort of a VIP club that got the market research reports earlier. They had access to it. And so is there sort of this access to content? Are they paying for access to something that someone else doesn't have? Maybe even if you have a freemium model, it's access to premium sort of features and benefits, but basically that is what you can pay for. What are some of the things that you have access to that you are sharing with your customers that maybe they would even be willing to pay for it, to have it in a different way or customized or something along those lines? Scarcity. So this is really important. Whenever you talk about something, you want to make something a scarce resource. So again, this creates urgency. And we're going to talk about this also around pricing. You need to create scarcity. If I know I can get whatever you have whenever it is available, and I don't have to make a decision today, you're not going to get people to actually buy. So you have to create scarcity, and that's either through limited time, limited quantities. There has to be sort of a call to action. So it doesn't have to be a real scarcity. You can create this kind of scarcity, but that is often what pushes them over the finish line. So how are you doing that? And how are you really creating a sense of scarcity? Oh, we only have one left, only one spot, something. There are lots of ways you can do this, especially from a marketing perspective. Health and well-being. And here I want to talk about also peace of mind. When you're talking about your customers, it is actually super important if you're like, you don't have to worry. You don't have to worry. We have you covered. We're checking all the boxes for you. All you have to do is this, and we talked, this is around security, this could be privacy, but it also could be just around the entire transaction and process. Are you communicating that literally you do not have to worry as a customer? And if you are, then that's something that's really important. Now, there's also physical health and well-being. And if you are addressing those as well, communicate. How are you helping people, especially in this last year with COVID? Mental health has become a big conversation piece. So if it's one less thing I have to mentally keep in my head and juggle, that's a great thing. That's a great benefit, right? Obviously wealth. So we will pay money to make money. So if you can show me how I can make more money, I will pay you some money to do that. So if you have a shortcut, if you understand, if you can make me do this faster, have access to it quicker, that is something that people quickly and customers see the value in. So again, can you help me create more wealth in whatever ways that I'm doing this in other businesses? Can you, and let's be clear, wealth is both from a business perspective, if you're doing B2B, increase revenues or decrease costs. In both cases, you're helping me make money. A dollar earned is a dollar, or dollar saved is a dollar earned. So it also is on the cost side and the expenses side. So are you doing that? And are you communicating how you're helping your customers either save money or make more money? Can you help me be successful? If you can help me be successful, if you can guarantee a certain level of success, or you can reduce the risk of failure, then I am willing to actually look at your solution, look at your products, look at your offerings. So success, selling success, or a reduction in failure is a really, really important thing. So how can you actually communicate that to your customers, to your target audience, that what you're doing, what you're offering is going to help them increase their chances of success or decrease their chances of failure? Finally, status. We have status here. When they use your service, does this make them look better? This kind of follows into that self-esteem again, but on the status side, does this increase their thing? Are you giving them a certification? Do they look better in their industry? All of these things, we are all competing. Your customers are competing with their competitors. So how can you make them look good? How can you give them a stamp of approval? That's really important. What kind of status are you offering them by using your product or by leveraging your product and services? Entertaining, again, we all like to be entertained. So are you finding a way for this also to maybe to be fun or entertaining? So entertainment is something that we obviously all pay for that may or may not be appropriate, but I wanted to highlight it because we have a variety of different businesses here. And so you definitely want to keep this in mind around entertainment. Just the rule of thumb, generally speaking, if you are trying to sell something that's entertainment, we as society are willing to pay roughly about $5 per hour of entertainment. So if you think about a movie, it's roughly $10 for a 2-hour thing. Video games usually have 20 hours of play, so they're coming in at $70 to $100. So $5 per hour is a good rule of thumb to think about there. And finally, we will pay to express our own creativity, to learn, and to express ourselves. So this is education. A lot of us will pay for education, but also if I want to sort of express myself, I want to use tools to show who I am, to customize my uniqueness. That is something that customers are going to pay. So do your services allow your customers to learn something, to basically have additional knowledge? Are you giving them, because if you are you actually highlighting that that's what they're getting from your product, maybe well beyond even the specific things that you do, right? So again, creativity, learning, self-expression, these are all what I call monetization building blocks, right? So this is psychology, and how does that apply in your industry and to your product? Again, not all of these will apply to everyone. And so I just wanted to highlight sort of, this is generally why we buy. And if you think about yourself and any purchase, I would argue that one of these, but ideally probably a combination of these, stack them up, have someone save time, have them learn a lot, and then have them look good at the end of it. You provide those three sort of building blocks, it's almost a slam dunk that they're going to go and start using your product or your service. So the more of these you can actually combine, the more compelling your offering actually is. Okay. So really what I'm bringing these, so I want you to like think of these as possibilities, and then think about how do they relate to what it is you're selling, and then tap into these, because it will help you on your sales side when you're selling to others to communicate those customer benefits, why they should choose you, and how you can make them better, and how you can motivate them to be better in their lives and in the situations that you support them in. Any questions? Any questions? All right, cool. So we have some fundamentals now. So now we're going to talk about business models and types of marketing, and pretty much really basic, business models. We have two parties usually, and I'm going to call a marketplace or an exchange where they meet. And that marketplace doesn't have to be, physical. It could be online. It could be a business room, a business conference room. But you have two parties, and they meet in a marketplace, whether that's real or virtual. It doesn't really matter. And usually one party gives something to the other party, and in exchange, you get currency back. pretty standard model. I'm just giving you a very basic model of business models and business transactions. One of the things that you may not always think about when we're talking about types of market is there are different ways that this transaction can happen. And so the first thing is what we call a primary marketplace. And that's really where, let's say the green one is a vendor and they're selling something to a traditional customer. That's kind of what we all think of when we think of business models, a customer or partner, and you're selling something to them, right? And that's great. And that's what most of our business models are, and that's wonderful. But there are also secondary marketplaces. And so I want you to start thinking about secondary marketplaces in your industry and with your business model. Is there a way for peer-to-peer transactions and for you to get a cut of a peer-to-peer transaction? So yes, maybe you sell them a product, but, and I'll give you a very sort of consumer one, but the idea of publishers who sell textbooks to students. They sell textbooks to students, but then when the students then have used it, there is a whole used textbook marketplace that happens and students sell to other students, right? So but most publishers don't have a marketplace for that to happen. So they're losing out on revenue because there are transactions that are happening outside of that first primary revenue model, right? So when you think of things, you want to really think about what are the peer-to-peer transactions that you could actually facilitate. I'm in Vancouver, well, Vancouver Canucks tickets. They actually had, at one point, they have a marketplace. If you can't attend, you can post it there and they will help sell your tickets. If you have season tickets, they will help sell it to other people who are interested. And that actually avoids scamming. It avoids everything because it's all sanctioned by Vancouver Canucks and it's one of their properties. So you can know and trust that when I buy these tickets online through that marketplace, I'm getting valid tickets, I'm getting real tickets, right? But they also take a cut of that second transaction. So not only are they selling the season tickets, they're also getting a cut on the peer-to-peer pieces, right? And then finally, and we're seeing a little bit of this, it's actually the reverse. So you have customers and users who are creating services, they're creating product, they're creating maybe a brand, and they're kind of selling it back to you. And I'm going to go into a couple of examples of these, but the one that probably is most recent or that would come to mind are influencers. Influencers that are out there, they are actually building a brand, they're actually building an audience, and then often companies will pay them to kind of leverage that network and leverage what's going on there. But are your customers creating content? Are your customers creating solutions that maybe you could repackage and resell? Is that possible? Could you partner with them? Are they building things? It's also a way for small companies to leverage the communities that they build. Instead of you doing all the work, let your customers do some of the heavy lifting and then maybe share the proceeds. Maybe you do a revenue share, right? So there are lots of ways to structure these things. And I just want to highlight it because we tend to focus on business models where I have a service, I have a product, I sell it to customers, and that's it. And I want you to start thinking, are there possibilities that exist outside of that model? So then in my example, if I go back, we talked about currency. So something that gets exchanged. And I just want to highlight that when I say I sell you something and I get currency in return, there are a lot of different things that can stand in for currency. So the first thing we think of is money, obviously dollars and cents. I sell you something, you pay me with some sort of financial instrument, right? So that makes perfect sense and we're all familiar with it. But maybe it's donations that you're getting, or maybe, and here's the thing, one of the challenges I have with sort of even for-profit companies, I have had some for-profit companies that I love, but there's no need for me to buy multiple products or their service multiple times, but I still might love to support them. So even for-profit companies, having ways for those who are evangelists to give, to basically support you and say, hey, I think you're awesome, I just love to give you something, is something to consider. Doesn't happen all the time. Don't get me wrong. It's not something that there's a huge revenue stream, but if you have people who are passionate about what you're doing and really want to support you, maybe it's not about buying another product or buying something else again. Maybe it's just, you know what, I think what you're doing is important. I just want to donate, and give them that option, give them an opportunity to do that. Volunteers. So maybe I sell you something and in return we get volunteers. As I like to say, basically if you can get someone else to do the work, that is revenue. If I don't have to pay someone to do the work, I am making money, I'm saving money, someone else is hopefully getting some experience. So maybe you give something to get something in return, and maybe that's someone else's time. Maybe that's the currency that we're talking about here. The next thing is downloadable content. So maybe the idea here is, what I want you to do is I want to give you something and then you download an ebook. So that could be something that you're doing. So downloadable content could be what you get in return for doing something. Email addresses. So sign up for my newsletter. That is a transaction, because once I have your email, I can continue to send you messages in the future and I can continue to market to you. So that's really, really important, is that an email address is part of that lead generation piece that really allows you to build a relationship over time, even if they're not ready to commit or convert today. So email addresses might be what you want to get and what you grab. And I look at email as a kind of currency, because I can do so much with that going forward. Maybe it's traffic or visitors to your website. You really are doing brand awareness and you want to get more people to your website or to that landing page so you can convert them. So maybe that's really what that currency is. I'm going to give you something on social media so that you come to my website and you download something and you start engaging with me sort of at my home on my terms in an area that I control, right? So that might be what you're looking for in return. It could be the quality or quantity of engagement. And what I mean by that is, comments, shares, likes, subscribes. Again, what is it that you want to do? What is it you want to promote from an engagement perspective? And, what are you seeing there? So I'll give you something in order for you to like. I'll give you content so that you share it. So this is sort of what I'm talking about, that transactional piece that happens in a lot of ways that has nothing to do with money, but is very important in building our brand and building awareness of our company, our products, and our services. And then finally, obviously we have sales. I will give you something and hopefully maybe you will sell something. So this could be, so Abby, in what you said, referrals and affiliates. I give you something and then you go out and promote it, and then you might get a piece of that commission. So ultimately, the goal here is we do want to increase our sales, but we want to find more interactive ways to do this. In terms of primary marketplaces, I thought I'd give you a couple of ideas around what some of the business models are for primary marketplaces. I'm going to go through each of the various marketplaces. So this is the one where we have a vendor and we have customers or partners who pay something. So the first one is kind of upfront flat fees. So you pay a flat fee, you pay a fee at the very beginning. I like to think of, I buy something, I pay it. I may like it, I may not like it, but once I've paid, I'm done. And there's not any kind of recurring renewal. I know a lot of you are doing SaaS models with subscriptions, but sometimes there is a benefit to just offering a price, a flat fee. You pay once. One of the companies is doing hardware. You pay an upfront fee for the hardware, and then the subscription is a service part of what you're offering, right? So if there are things that you can do upfront, maybe it's a flat fee, and that's definitely something that can be part of your business model. Upfront and flat fees can complement and augment any SaaS subscription model. So understand that when I say these can all work together, and it's not an either or only one and not the other. The next thing is I've been really playing around with sort of offline and online experiences. I know in COVID, most of us have been online, but as things start to open up, I really think that there will be some interesting opportunities now that everybody has been online to start leveraging both offline experiences with online experiences. And what I mean by this is maybe you have an offline experience, maybe you have an event, and then at the end of the event, you give everybody a code and say, go online to our website. And if you put that in, you get something, you get a piece of swag, or you get something that you can download, or you get registered in our newsletter or a draw. And so you start sort of building online and offline experiences and merging the two. There's been a lot of hype around NFTs for those of you who have been following them and not quite understand what they are, but people are using the NFTs to sort of have tickets that then get you access to events. So it could be online, you do something, and when you do that, that gets you access to something that happens offline, right? So try to think about some of the ways that you can be a little bit more creative as you go through the experiences that you have, and literally drive people where you want them to go. If you have them captive in an offline space, Figure out how you can drive them to your website. Figure out a way to get them there to do whatever it is you want them to do. Don't just be like, oh, this is great, here's a card, good luck. Make sure that they actually move in those directions. Many of you have subscriptions in the freemium model. This is very common. And subscriptions are awesome. We've talked about it, and Peter and I will talk with all of you about sort of just that, recurring revenue and how great that is. Also, people don't tend to end their subscriptions for quite a while once they have them going. The freemium model is wonderful. The one caveat I would say is it's really difficult sometimes to figure out, where do you draw the line? How do you give enough features or benefits to the free model, but not enough that you actually give them an incentive to upgrade, right? So one of the challenges with freemium is, and I've worked with lots of clients, is finding that fine line of enough that you can grab people and that they're engaged and they see value, but not too much such that they see all these other things, these premium features and services that they can upgrade to, benefits that make them want to upgrade to the upgrade system. So a lot of times people are now doing the free trial versus a freemium, a true freemium model, a free trial. So you have a limited time where you might have access to everything, so you can really see what it can do. And then after the free trial, once you kind of get hooked in that free trial, here's the other thing: make sure there's enough time for people to get hooked. If you have something that takes several weeks, give people several weeks. The more time they invest, the more likely they are to upgrade or to convert to a paid subscription model. A lot of people are like, oh, I just want to give them 7 days. If you don't think that they're going to create a habit in 7 days, give them 14, give them 30 days, give them the time they need so that this becomes a resource that eventually they cannot live without. All right. That's what you want to do with those free trials. So keep that in mind as well. Market research. So one of the things that a lot of companies kind of don't think about from a product or service perspective is, what kind of information are you collecting in aggregate that you might be able to share or post, or show about the industry, what's happening, the size of deals, the color of things, what are people doing, what are the trends that we're seeing? If you have that kind of information, aggregating it and creating market research can be actually quite valuable. And people often will love to have this, both people within your industry and people who are looking at your industry. So one of the things that I often find is really sorely overlooked is really market research. And the market research I'm talking about is the data that you are collecting, putting that in aggregate and creating beautiful reports and information that then can be shared and monetized either to your community or to others who are interested in maybe marketing to your customers and to your community. So again, something to think about as you go forward. The pay-as-you-go, so we're all familiar with that, talk and text, but pay-as-you-go might be a model that allows, again, people to kind of test the waters, pilot it. If you think that there's going to be some hesitation, let them pay as they go. Of course, you don't want this to be as good as if they do a full subscription. So this is going to be more expensive than if they got sort of the full feature, but it gives people options. And so it's a way to get that habit going, maybe with less risk, less investment. And so you might want to offer something along these lines. Expandables, upgrades, and collectibles. So again, what you want to think about are there things that you are doing, you want to upgrade, you want to upsell, obviously, but are there special things, specialty things that you can offer that are, here we are, scarce? So not everybody gets them. We have 10 customers who are going to get this wonderful feature or this wonderful service for this particular time. And when 10 customers do it, we're done. No one else gets it, and we won't be offering it again for a certain period of time. It creates a really great sense of urgency, and it also creates a little bit of exclusivity, right? And maybe it's something that they then have, or I've done this with small startups, the first 100 people who sign up get the service for free forever, because they're going to go out there and hopefully if they're happy with it, they can evangelize and talk about it, and they never have to pay. So again, something that is very sort of a collectible account, I think is something that you also, so when we say collectibles, it could be a collectible, it could be an account that has some very specific perks with it that maybe other accounts do not have. Access, as I've mentioned, you want to have access to something. Do you want to provide access to others so that they can actually get that information and monetize it in a way that, only they have access to it? And there are different ways. I look at TED Talks. TED, if you go to the TED conference, all of us are probably familiar with the TED conference. You go to the TED conference, you pay, $10,000 a ticket. But then if you don't want to pay, they start giving it 18 months later, they start showing what happened 18 months ago. So you can actually say, those who are willing to pay, get it first. If you don't want to pay, that's fine. We'll let you have it, but we may let you have it later. Maybe it's 3 months later, or maybe it's some sort of timing around that. So what access do people want to have, and how can you give it to them early? The other thing is with a lot of SaaS companies, sort of APIs. Many of you have built your technologies with APIs. So this is really about integrating with other third parties. How do you allow and get them to pay to actually access either your community, your technologies? This might be a white label solution. So there are lots of ways of looking at this, but what does that look like? And is that a monetization that you can do? Yeah. So Jeff is saying not only that, you can't organize a certain size of text event until you have attended those conferences. Yes. So you've seen all those TEDx events. You can't necessarily, if you have a large TEDx event that you want to put on, you have to have attended the real TED event to actually sort of get the licensing rights to do that. So there are all these things that are kind of connected to them, right? So it's not just, and that's a way to also manage their brand, right? So really, really well done. So interesting business models. In terms of secondary marketplaces, really what I want to talk about here are pretty much trading and auctions. If you have equipment, if you have other things that somehow people may want to sell that peer-to-peer, that is something that I really recommend you think about. If there is a secondary market, don't have that secondary market end up on Craigslist where you are not part of that conversation. If you are selling something, there is a way to create that secondary marketplace so you can capitalize on it. You control it. You can actually certify it. You can have security. You can have privacy around that secondary marketplace. So, we don't always feel good about doing business with another peer. But if we have a company that we trust who's overseeing this peer-to-peer market, that makes us a lot more comfortable, right? A big one, actually almost their entire business model, Airbnb, people are selling their spaces to other people. I don't know if I'd want to go outside of Airbnb and just do a deal with someone on Craigslist, but within Airbnb, I feel a lot more comfortable in that peer-to-peer network. So trading, auctions, are there elements of what you're doing that could have a secondary marketplace? And I just want to mention that for those of you for whom it might make sense. And then tertiary marketplaces, as I mentioned, so basically where you have customers or you have your community creating products and services that in some ways get sold back to you for you then to market or sell, is a really interesting thing, largely, especially for small startups where you don't usually have a lot of staff. We're all limited, and it's just a great way to get your community to do some of that heavy lifting. So this is, I'm not sure if you're familiar with this website, but it's called Template Monster, and they have templates for websites, for mobile apps, all kinds of templates. They create templates themselves, Template Monster, with their designers, but they also allow independent designers to put their designs in the same marketplace. So when you go to Template Monster, there'll be some that are Template Monster templates, and then there'll be some that are independent ones, and they just do a revenue share with them. And so what they've basically said is, okay, we're marketing to this market, but we're going to have some of our original stuff, but we've also kind of are bringing in some of this other stuff, and we share the revenues with those who want to do that. And independents want to do it because it's a huge marketplace, right? And so you want to go where the people are. It'd be a lot harder for me to put up my own website and sell my designs off of my own website and get that kind of traffic, right? So that's why I would want to participate in something like this. So again, this is sort of, I'm saying UGC, meaning user-generated content. In this case, so the customer-generated content, community-generated content is what I'm talking about here. So what does that look like? And it doesn't have to be content, it can be services as well. Are they doing things? Another example that's really UGC would be Etsy, which is a complete marketplace for handmade goods. And it is consumer driven for sure, but everything there is developed by their community, and they just provide the marketplace, and they do the marketing of Etsy and the brand. So, if you're looking for something that's handmade, that's where you would go. And I feel more comfortable doing that than sort of a one-off or just a small person that I don't know who lives somewhere around the world who may or may not deliver the goods that I'm looking for. So that would be another example. And then, as I mentioned, influencers. So influencers, in a lot of ways, this is why we have paid, and primarily I'm talking here about paid influencers, where you as a company are asking someone to go out there and promote your products. What they've already done is they've built their brand. They've built their audience. They've built a certain credential around that. And so influencers is another business model that really builds on this tertiary market, where you're having someone kind of do the marketing and promotion of your services and products on your behalf. And for that, you're paying them, but they are not employees. So they are not internal to your organization. So they also have freedom to do it with other ones, with other companies and organizations within your industry. So influencers are definitely something to consider and keep in mind around this, okay? Any questions around sort of primary, secondary, tertiary marketplaces? And hopefully I've sparked a couple of maybe different ideas or ideas of things that you could think about to either expand what you're currently doing or maybe augment or complement what you're doing. Okay, any questions? Looks like it's good so far. Awesome. Okay, so next we're going to talk about pricing tips. And it's funny, I've been having quite a few comments with people around pricing. So let's go into the pricing tips. So the first thing I'm going to do these are all tips. Some are about how do you present prices. So this might be like more on your website, but there are also some strategic and I'd say really important principles that I'm going to highlight. Now, in my additional, I'm going to do a couple tonight, but in my additional resources, there's a great article with 42 pricing tactics that I recommend everybody read because, and I don't have time to go through all 42. So I picked some of the ones that I thought were the most interesting and appropriate, but I recommend you go through the whole article. And I mean, they're short tips, so it seems long, but it actually is well worth it. So the first thing that I'm going to highlight around pricing is literally, and this is a visual thing, make your prices smaller. The size of it, people always, $59, they want to make it big. The bigger we as human beings and as visual beings, things that are bigger, they have more impact, and they actually they make it seem larger than maybe even the actual dollar amount that they represent. So when you are displaying your prices, generally you want to display them, if you have the option, to display them in a smaller font, usually with a lot of space around them, and sort of make them a little more minimize their impact, because we always focus on price. And so if you can minimize the visual focus, you will do better in terms of your collateral, your marketing, your websites. Basically, make it smaller. So that's the first tip. Second tip, again, if you have words around your prices, use words that are related to a smaller magnitude. So in this example I have here, $18 high performance. High and 18 makes it seem like it's a high price, right? $18 in low maintenance basically makes people think, oh, it's a low price. You're not even talking about the price, but low versus high conversion rates. We've done some conversion rate optimization. Like, they have actually been twofold in terms of people clicking on the second call to action versus the first. So use words that actually sort of reduce our focus on the low or the small, or the, as a small magnitude. And it doesn't have to be related to the price. It could be a feature, right? So don't be like big, go the other way and go, we have a small number of So that is how you want to work with your words, if you have words surrounding your prices. So keep that in mind as well. One of the things that is a really big thing, and I find that, like, for me, this has completely changed the way that I negotiate around prices, how I present prices. And it is this idea of what I call a pricing anchor. And so the idea here is that you create a price that is usually higher than what it is you are going to be selling at. And that anchors people's ideas. And then all of a sudden your price seems lower than whatever that anchor price is. So in this example, we have an anchor of a reserve. And so the anchor of the reserve basically says $23.19 is the reserve price, but you only have to bid $15. So inherently, when we look at this, we're going to go, oh, 15 versus 23, what a deal, right? And so all of a sudden you have anchored people to that $23. And so what you're asking for is, I mean, we all know this, with negotiations, you start with a high price. Same thing actually goes online. And when you're in digital, you need to anchor people without telling them that you're anchoring them. This is why I was talking to a team today, a company today. That's why we have MSRPs that nobody ever pays. Manufacturing suggested retail pricing, nobody pays the MSRPs. Everything is always a discount, right? That is your anchor price. So one of the things to keep in mind is, what can you anchor people around so that if you are offering different options, it always looks great compared to what they're doing. Something to really keep in mind. Again, the other thing similar, but what you might not think about is also expose them to higher other prices, incidental prices. So if you have a page and there's something you want to sell and you're highlighting it and it's really low, then also maybe highlight other things that are higher so that it looks like a great deal. And it doesn't have to be the same product. It doesn't even have to necessarily even be the same category. But again, this is just how our minds work. We start seeing what is the lowest number on this page. Wow, all of a sudden that doesn't seem so bad. So pricing, anchor pricing really sets that bar. And then from that bar, we either look and go, oh, this is much higher or this is much lower. And it's something that we do quite a bit. So keep that in mind as well. Also, for those of you who have like pricing pages, actually always go from highest to lowest, left to right. And the reason being is that when you go from highest to lowest, again, you're anchoring people. So, oh my God, the most expensive one is $99. Wow, what a deal. If I now can get it only for $10, right? So again, you're anchoring them, but more importantly, as they go through each one of those lists, you're highlighting what they're losing, not what they're gaining. And so basically, as they go from left to right, they have to give up something. And people are less likely, you know, if I give you something, you're less likely to want to give it back to me. So the idea here is show them all the wonderful things that they could get if they got the best of it. And then give them the options like, but you know, if that's not a good price, you know, you can do this, you kind of lose out on these features, and you can go to the really cheap one, but with the really cheap one, you kind of really lose out, right? It sets a very different framework. When you do it the other way, people will go, well, you know, the first one's good enough, right? I don't really need all those extra features. So if you can, flip your pricing often and do highest to lowest, left to right, because that's how we read. You're anchoring them from the highest price. They still may do the $10, but you often will recognize, they will recognize that they have to give up more as they move down that list versus gaining more. And people are like, I don't need those. Those are nice to have. They're not, you know, they're not must haves. So something to keep in mind with your pricing. The other thing is, again, visual contrast if you have sale prices. So if you have sale prices, and in this example, you notice I've made it smaller. I've made it physically smaller, the $35. I've also used color as a way to highlight that it's a sale price. So this is something that you might want to play around with. Don't make them look equivalent. You know, any way you can do to basically show that something has actually visually shrunken is a good thing. And I know many of you are like, oh, really, Rochelle? Yes, really. These are some of the tips that you will find work over and over again. And this definitely in your website, but even in your pitch decks, like go through and look at what you have and where you have things and how things are happening. If you have customer decks that you're doing and you're sending them to customers, you know, make sure that those numbers are, you know, just kind of fade away so people don't start focusing on it. Because that's what how many times have you heard, oh, price is too high, or no, I can't do it, I can't afford it. So you want to start minimizing the focus on your prices. The next thing is if you have purchases that are based on emotion, so basically people, you have an audience and they're just like, oh, it's a impulse buy or something, or that's very emotional, we generally recommend that you keep out the cents. You basically keep it to, I'm going to say, integers. So for those math, remember, sort of back in the day, basic math, you know, don't have decimal points. Keep it very simple and make sure that people, it's just $19. You don't want it to be a sort of, you know, then it's easy. I know what it is. I can just say, yep, that's worth it. It's worth it to me. On the flip side, if it's about rationality, you want definitely cents. And if you have customers who are very, very focused, or if you have people who are more analytical or have much more of a left brain and scientists, and that's what they're evaluating things are. If you're talking to a CFO, inevitably having precise numbers gives the impression that there's a lot more information and a lot more research that has been put into that particular thing. So if you have a quote and the quote is going to a CFO, or I find sometimes a purchasing manager or procurement manager or something like that, even if my quote came out to $19, I will make it 1986 is my quote, because 1986 gives them a sense that it's not just a number I picked out of a hat. It's not just a lot of easy stuff. There's been some analysis and there's been a lot of thought that's been put into those numbers. So know your audience, know what really will drive them, and then make sure that your numbers reflect that appropriately. Definitely when you give percentage discounts, this is again about numbers, and under $100, always give the percentages, because really the difference here is when you have $20 and $2 off, it looks like you only have $2 off. But when you have 10% off, 10 is bigger than 2, even though it's exactly the same number. Exactly the same number, but 10% off looks way more impressive than $2. Same, like literally. So if you have basically if you have dollar figures that are less than $100, always use percentages when you're talking about discounts, because the percentages will always be larger than the absolute value of what that percentage represents. And the flip side is when you have big numbers, if it's over 100, always use absolute dollars, because the same thing is that for $250, 10% off, it's a 10, it doesn't look like that much, but $25 off of $250 looks much bigger. I'm getting much more off, right? So again, what's going on here is literally I look at it, again, they're the same offer here, but the $25 off will get people to go after it much, much faster, okay? So yes, Ebony, yes, mind blown. It is number stuff. And it seems actually quite obvious when you start looking at it and you're like, whoa, I had no idea. But it really, these are like small things that can have a huge difference. When we talk about conversion rate later on, I think my six digital marketing one talks about conversion rate optimization. A lot of these things are going to make really small differences make huge differences in the results that you see. Then also, when you are providing discounts, what I want to recommend is that you also provide a reason for the discount. So sometimes people go, oh, just why is it 100% off? Or why is it $100? What's going on here? What don't I know, right? It could be a special. That's okay. You can have a discount. It could be literally, we have Victoria Day weekend coming up, Victoria Day weekend special. That's fine. That's why you get $100 off. But otherwise, it looks like either you're trying to get rid of inventory or crap that hasn't sold. So what you really want to understand is, why are they doing this? And always obviously put a positive spin on it, right? So put real positive spins on it and really understand why I'm doing this, so that I don't think that it's because the product is less worthy of it. That's the thing, is if you just have discounts and it's $100 off, I now think that this product is only worth $150. It's not really worth a $250, because I don't understand why you've given me a discount. There must be something wrong with it. And so what you want to reassure your buyers is that that's not the case. Finally, what I want to talk about is, this is just sort of an example here where a company offered sort of two options, web only and web and print. And web only was $59 and web and print was $125. And when they posted this, basically in terms of those who chose it, most people chose the web only version for $59. It was cheaper. That probably wouldn't surprise most people. That's fine, right? There is something that we talk about in pricing called a decoy. And basically it is a decoy pricing that you put in your list and you don't ever expect anybody to pick it. But it is there in some ways to anchor people towards, what a great deal. I can get web only for $59, I can get print only for $125, but I can get both for $125. What a deal. That looks like the best deal, right? This is the results that happened. So not only did fewer people choose the web only version, 16% versus 68%, 84% picked the web and print. And of course, nobody picked print only. You don't expect them to. It was purely there as what we call a pricing decoy. And it was there to anchor them and to get them to think about, you know what, what's the best? Here we all look for value. So what is the best value? Well, I could get print only for 125, but if I bundle it with web, it doesn't cost me anything extra. Woohoo, what a deal, right? So that's why you sometimes will use a pricing decoy and with no expectation that anyone will ever select it. And if you do, great, awesome. I mean, like that's, I mean, be able to deliver on it. So decoys does not mean you can't deliver on it, but the idea is that hopefully, that you don't, that's not something that you anticipate anyone will ever use. And then finally, as I've been saying before, create a sense of urgency by being scarce. So as I've heard rumors, and I don't know if anyone here can validate or has more insight, but for example, on Amazon, there will never be, more than a certain number of items available. I mean, they'll say in stock, but when things start going down, one way to get people to buy is, there's only one left, right? Only 5 more left. So you create that urgency, you create that scarcity, because that ultimately is what gets people to purchase, to buy, to convert. And so you want to make sure that you're using your numbers and your pricing to create that sense of urgency. So those are my pricing tips. I hope there's been 1 or 2 that help you or make you think a little bit about how you are presenting your information. In terms of action items, really what I want to do here is the first thing I would say is when you start, revisit your unique selling propositions. So again, USP, as it's often called, your customer benefits. In the following slides, I have a bunch of questions that I would ask you about your business revenue models in terms of what is motivating people to actually buy your product or your service. What is behind that? So that's something to keep in mind. Then also, are you clearly communicating that to the customer? Often we actually have huge benefits, but we're not actually communicating them. We're communicating the top 1 or 2, but not all of those things. Remember, like maybe there are 4 or 5 things that you're doing that's really helping the customer. Make sure it's really clear around what that is. Again, possibly consider additional business models that are complementary to your core business model. So is there a secondary marketplace play here that you could go after? Is there something you could do on a tertiary that helps with the community, helping you build some of your business models or build some of your products and services? Is that a possibility? Review your pricing strategies. Hopefully I've given you a couple of tips around what you can do there, around the pricing strategies. And then I have a bunch of articles and videos on the additional resources slide. Actually, I think this week it's only articles for some more details. So here were some of the questions I've asked you to look at around your sort of your selling proposition, your unique selling proposition, so you can maybe answer them. I'm not going to go through all of them, but they're here, around what you can do with your customers. And then here are actual the articles that I would recommend that you read. The first one is actually an archived article that goes into even more detail around those sort of buyer motivations. It's from 2012. It got actually pulled from the internet. I found it, and I still think it's one of probably my go-to articles in terms of why the psychology of why people buy. So something happened, and then some business models, some best practices, 8 digital business models decoded. The pricing psychology one, as I said, has the 42 tactics. It's really great. And then there's a great article that was recently published around 11 SaaS pricing hacks. A lot of it's, or some of it's what I've talked about before, but also very specifically around SaaS models that I thought would be helpful as well. And so great, Jeff. I'm glad to hear that you're busy multitasking and implementing these quick pricing tips on the spot. Awesome. Glad to hear that. With that, I am done. I have 5 minutes for questions and answers. Sorry for the Gatlin round there, but I will stop sharing and gladly answer any questions that anyone has around. Hopefully this has made sense and gives you some ideas as to areas where you can maybe tweak your models. And the reason I'm talking about this, everybody's like, oh, you're marketing, Rochelle, but I'm going to be asking you, what are you selling? What are your customer benefits? All of these questions, I'm going to be digging into those with each of you, no matter what the marketing materials are. And I think it's really important that you are able to answer these and understand why people buy from you, not just that they buy from you or what they're buying from you, but why do they buy from you? Because at the end of the day, once you know that, you can start hitting those hot buttons and hopefully even see better sales and marketing. Your calls to actions should always go back to those The copy should always go back to those. That should be consistent across all of your messaging and across all of your sales activities. So there you have it. Any questions? 4 minutes. Does anyone have any questions?
You can unmute too if you want. If
Yeah,
you don't
can
want to.
unmute. Yeah.
Oh, Siri.
Okay. Siri, on the business model side with so many options to pick from, are there tools to help narrow down the most appropriate models? So I've given you a couple of tables, Siri, where you can look into that. I would say that part of this is looking at your business. One, looking at which ones are complementary, and some are going to involve a lot more work. So looking at your team and resources and which ones can you go into. So some are going to naturally be a great extension of what you're already doing. And I'd say start with those first. Others are going to be completely new business models, and there might be a lot more involved in making that happen. And if you do not have the team or support to do that, I would say hold off and let's just focus on the things that you're doing well. But I think that this is, like what I want you to do is start thinking about all the possible ways that you can make money. And, one of the things that I think about, I think about Apple, and of course, people, oh, Apple, but Apple has hardware. Yes, that's their, Apple has the App Store, so they're actually providing a service there. Apple has they actually sell other people's accessories for Apple. So they're getting to the game where other people, Belkin sells their accessories in the Apple Store. Apple gets a cut of those, right? So Apple has a lot of these models that are part of their ecosystem. And so what I want you to think about is, what is your business model ecosystem, not just how are you selling what you do, right? And also, are there possibilities to sort of share the business model ecosystem with others? Adam, you have your hand up. Go for it.
Yeah. So as you know, we are introducing the new shared customer support model. Yes. Within a week or two. And actually, I just had a discussion with a prospect this morning about basic pricing. But that's something that we kind of made up recently, but we haven't really tested the market. So I was wondering if there's a kind of a new pricing strategy. What's the best and easiest and quickest way actually to test whether your prices really make sense? Because what I'm afraid that once we get started with one client or two clients, after that, it will be harder to change drastically.
So a couple of things that I would do is, excellent point. One of the things that, especially in the 11 sort of SaaS hacks, pricing hacks, one of the things that they also recommend is that you often offer less choice. So one of the challenges that I find, and I have this with my husband, who is a software developer, actually a software architect, and he always wants to give, he's like, I can make it happen. I can give them as many choices as I want so that they can have it. Nah, wrong answer. Rochelle, like the marketer, I keep shutting him down. Give them 3 to 4 choices, Adam, first of all, because too much choice makes it really hard to make a decision. And you want to make the decision, you want it to be easy. It's like, I either fall into bucket 1, bucket 2, bucket 3, and this also goes, I know enterprise, you can do different deals, but as a starting point for those negotiations, don't give them 10 different options. Give them, 3 options. Generally we have clients who fall into this bucket. We have clients that fall into this bucket, and we have clients that fall into this bucket. These are the packages we normally see. Now we will customize something for you, but just to give you a sense, this is what those 3 levels look like, right? 3 to 4 is all you want to give them. In terms of your pricing, what I would do is, here's the thing, price high is where I would start when you're starting your thing, because you can always discount down. So if you price it and you think it's a relatively high, maybe it's even too high, you can always be like, hey, we have a special discount for people this month, and you get 50% off, right? The other thing that we find with pricing in terms of pricing psychology is that people are looking for discounts, usually are more receptive to small discounts at the beginning of their relationship with you. So if you give them 10% off at the beginning, that's great. You probably don't have to give them 10% once they're a customer and they move forward. So using discounts at the beginning to get them to sign on, but they can be very small. They don't have to be huge. People actually over perceive that as a huge benefit. Like they basically over evaluate that versus other things. So I would definitely say that keep the options simple, give them 3 options, maybe price it high so that you have room to negotiate down if you start recognizing people are being a little bit hesitant. And that way you have some room to negotiate. And here's the thing, I would also say, I've said to lots of customers, you're one of the early ones. I'll give you a deal as an early one. You can lock them in. You can do all kinds of things with early pricing to get a better sense of what they want. And that will hopefully give you a better sense of where it actually ultimately needs to be. So use them as evangelists, use them in lots of other ways, testimonials, case studies. So even if you might not be making money off of those first sales or that first pricing piece, try to monetize them in other ways, monetize the relationship and monetize that in a way that you can then leverage that to get other customers who will pay a full price or pay a higher price. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Thank you. Thanks, Rochelle.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, it's 6:02. So if anyone has to drop off, please do. Rochelle's usually good about staying around to answer questions for anyone who wants to ask or just wants to listen. But you are not being rude if you leave, because
yes, absolutely. Time is up. So
have a good night for those who are up, and we'll see you next week. It's sales metrics with Peter.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Same place, same time.
Same place, same time. Yeah. Any other questions? I will stay around as long as people are here. So if anyone wants to ask me a question, you can do that. And if not, you can always ask me a question in our next meeting, our next face-to-face, because I'll be meeting with all of you face-to-face. So stew on it and maybe read some of those articles, and then we can always continue the conversation. So all good. I hope it's tweaked a few things and made you maybe just revisit some of your ideas around what it is you're doing. Again, many of you have your business models. So this is more expanding, honing, doing it maybe in a slightly different way. So all good.
All right. Thank you, Rochelle.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you. Thank you. Good night.
All right. See you all later.